Welcome to another episode of DYAD Lounge, where we talk about books, comics, TV shows, and movies in Star Wars.
In this episode, we have another conversation for you all, and it is the trial of Ahsoka Tano. Something's near and dear to my heart. But we are joined by two Star Wars fans who also are professionally lawyers. So, let's hop into it. Without further ado, come on in and enjoy your stay at the DYAD Lounge. All right, so jumping right into it, we have my favorite two Star Wars lawyers here. We want to get right in and have y'all introduce yourself. Who are you, and where can we find all of your awesome stuff?
So my name is Beth. You can find me on TikTok at mar.j.skywalker. And then on Twitter, I've become very active. Apparently, recently, that's just been my thing. At Mara_J_Skywalker.
Underscore gang unite, which I'm not part of, but I might do that on Instagram because Instagram shut down my account. There's a whole thing going on for no reason. Anyways, last but not least, we have a tall, dark, and handsome gentleman here by the name of Chris. Chris, can you introduce yourself?
Man, I'm just trying to get like you, Choco. I am Chris, aka Star Wars Lawyer, on Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. I also have a podcast, Too Black, Too Nerdy, where you can listen to wherever podcasts are found, or, catch us live at UmaCon this Sunday or the Sunday after this is recorded.
So before we get right into this conversation, just full disclosure, Choco and I will be staying out of this. Beth and Chris, we will have some lightning round questions for them, something to spice things up a bit, but we're not going to interfere too much. But before we begin, we should start by, establishing the premise of this conversation. So I'm of the understanding that the premise that Chris brings forth is that the Jedi Council betrayed Ahsoka Tano.
I don't know if betrayed is the word I would use. I would say they hung her out to dry. So pretty much, while I can agree with their decision to let Ahsoka stand trial, what I disagree with is the lack of preparation, attention to detail in getting to that. It seems they left their own investigation incomplete. And then once you had her out there, you left this child to face the full weight of the Republic judicial system with no support. I believe that even with, especially since the council was not unanimous in their vote to bar her from the Jedi Order, that then there should have been some discussion on how to best support her, because it doesn't seem like they set her up with Padme as her defense. It seemed like that was an Anakin and Padme decision, probably more of a Padme decision, and Anakin was like, yes, please.
Let's do a few stipulations here. Can you please clarify what hung her out to dry means?
So they send her and Anakin on this investigation, right? They choose them because they believe they're above suspicion because they were off-world. So you have them go throughout their investigation. They find Letta. Letta gets thrown in prison. She asks for Ahsoka. And then this is where everything kicks off terribly for Ahsoka, where she is presumably seen killing Letta. Now, just on its face, that you don't have to be in the room to use the Force on an object or a person. Jedi know this. So if Ahsoka's telling you that she's not doing it, and the video evidence that they have, which does get cut off, shows that Ahsoka is her hands are like this, she's looking around. As a Jedi, I'm going to be a little bit suspicious of that. And that there are, Dooku's out there, Ventress is out there. You don't know if there are any other, Force users that use the dark side that are out there that could be trying to be opportunistic. So there is easily an explanation that someone else is doing this, but you don't really pursue that. And then you find out, you see her with Ventress at some point. So Ventress is here and you don't go and get her. And she's pretty easy to find because Anakin finds her in 5 minutes. Like, I don't understand why the Jedi Council, before they decided to bar her, did not continue its own investigation and then present their findings to the Senate, or give that to Padme, so then Padme can then, bolster the defense. Like, Anakin was, in his Batman era while he was doing his investigation, and the council just sort of sat there and let, again, a child go up against the Republic judicial system with no support from them, the people that raised her, cared for her, and taught her how to be an investigator in the first place.
First, I want to stipulate that what I'm about to argue may not be my own personal opinion. This is just me taking the opposing side. So I think the biggest issue before we actually are able to evaluate if this was a fair and just process, and again, we can't really evaluate, we have to take like the morality outside of it, unfortunately, is the fact that we don't have any precedents as far as how trials are run, what exactly like the proper evidentiary procedures are. That's the most difficult thing to overcome, because without precedents, we can't evaluate if they were actually acting outside of their, like, the scope of their power, or if they were acting completely reasonably within the powers that they're granted, not only within their own jurisdiction, but within the Republic as well. And one of the most difficult things, in addition to that, is the fact that we have these very extreme examples of previous Jedi or Force users that, when they have turned, like Dooku, Pong Krell, things have gone very wrong, and they have been very trustworthy Jedi in the past. But with Dooku, our Yaddle, now for Yaddle, and then obviously with Pong Krell, it resulted in Umara. That's really all we have to say. Just one word. So if you have these very drastic circumstances that you have to figure out how to mitigate with the evidence that we're seeing, it's really hard to sit there and be like, okay, we don't have any procedures and we've seen these things go very wrong before. So are they actually overreacting, or is this appropriate based upon their own, again, we don't have the actual procedures, but is this actually like appropriate for the scope of, I guess, yeah, that's the biggest question. Is this actually like appropriate within the scope of the threat, if you will, or the risk?
I will say, and counter to that, with both Dooku and Pong Krell, we have motive. Dooku says there's corruption in the Senate and that the Jedi are, sort of immune to the stink of it, and they become too close to the Jedi, have become corrupt themselves. Dooku wasn't, especially now that we have Tales of the Jedi, Dooku wasn't exactly silent about that. And then we also now, with Pong Krell, he talked about how, like the dark side was taking over and there's like a new master out there and he's going to go join him. So you at least have that. There is no discussion throughout any time where Ahsoka is a suspect that a motive is discussed for her. It's just sort of, from Tarkin, it's tunnel vision and confirmation bias. He wasn't the biggest fan of Ahsoka based on how she was questioning him in the temple. And then, once he had her as a suspect, it was like, all right, that's it. So for the Jedi, if you're going to make this decision to bar someone from the Jedi Order, which is essentially like, even in a, like if this is in a trial situation, everything that they have known, you're essentially taking away from them. So if you're going to make that decision, you at least should complete your investigative process, because at this point they move faster for the sake of political expediency.
So I think the thing that's difficult with motive is the fact that we're only seeing this through the perspective of the viewers. Obviously, we are not able to see this through the perspective of the Jedi Council. And so while we have like Pong Krell who like monologues, and like, yes, we have Dooku, we're also given additional context clues through different perspectives that the Jedi don't have. And so we're coming at this, when we're looking at it, we're inherently biased because we're like, okay, well, I know there's something going on here. I know this person's evil. Or with Dooku, obviously, you know how things turn out just because of how they actually sequenced, and filmed, if you will, but how, Attack of the Clones, and then we go backwards to Clone Wars. And so you already know kind of what's going to happen. And so there's a teleological issue there that we really can't escape. And so I think that's something that needs to be taken into consideration with motive. And then also, again, this is difficult, not difficult. This is a good opportunity because it's making me challenge something that I normally wouldn't say. But I would say, why does motive have to be articulated in order for it to exist?
That's true, but I feel like if you're going to showcase, like if she was just some random civilian, but with how linked the Jedi are to the war effort, the Republic itself, if you are going to try and appease the masses on Coruscant, you're going to give them someone, but you're also going to try and assure them like, no, this is just a one-off, because I don't think Choco said this about this particular case, but this could have been used to start Order 66 early. Like, you could be like, well, if this is one Jedi, like how far gone are the Jedi? If this is a Padawan who's doing that, like, how was she instructed? Which also would have thrown Anakin into the crossfire. One of the things I would have done if I was Padme, I'd be like, Palpatine should not be here. Tarkin should not prosecute this case. Like, everybody is tied to Anakin. There's bias here, and I don't like it.
There should have been a lot of like recusal, just literally should have gotten a whole new panel because there's too much investment there. I 100% agree with that. 100%. But as far as starting Order 66, I think again that's logically what is the technical fallacy? Is that a straw man? I always forget which one it is. It's slippery. It might be slippery slope. And then there's another. See, you go to law school, what you get. It's like,
Tarkin did say that if they were not allowed to try Ahsoka, they would consider it an act of sedition. The Chancellor is trying to remove the Jedi from as many military cases as possible because they're supposed to be keepers of the peace. Ahsoka does mention that she's like, why was Letta removed from the Jedi custody? If she's still guilty, she needs to be dealt with and had to be told revenge is not the Jedi way.
Right. That's motive for killing Letta, but not motive for bombing the Jedi temple.
Gotcha.
That's where really the sedition against the Republic comes in. Like, even though the episode description says she's on trial for murder, like Palpatine just straight up says like, no, you're on trial for sedition against the Republic. And we can get into the evidentiary parts in a second, but I think the Jedi have to give her over. Essentially, that's otherwise you're going to start a civil war within a civil war. But I think that they needed to follow through with the rest of the investigation, because even if you have your suspect, you don't have anything that is concretely tying her to the crime. If this is someone, for the Jedi's perspective, if this is someone that has been under your care, you're going to want that for you, just so then you can reflect on, okay, is this something we need to look at the other Padawans or the other knights who have been, fighting in this war? Is this a larger issue? Because like, if you couldn't sense Dooku, you couldn't sense Pong Krell, and now you couldn't have sensed Ahsoka, even though we know it's Barriss. Like, we know the dark side has sort of affected our vision, clouded our vision. Like, maybe we need to do a bit more internal analysis.
I think this is actually, it's a really interesting point, because I think this gets into very much like the good faith, bad faith argument. Like, were the Jedi acting in good faith when they went through, I guess we can't really call it like an evidentiary procedure, but for lack of better terms, were they acting in good faith? Or were they acting in bad faith? I think that's the biggest question. And again, we are biased as the viewers. We know we have that. But I firmly believe that like the evidence and the actions that they take the episode, the Jedi Council they're acting in good faith. They're trying to do their, because obviously at this point too, another thing we have to take into consideration is the fact that the Jedi have, I don't want to say like a PR problem, but they're not exactly the most beloved individuals in the galaxy. I mean, it's not like Order 66 times where everyone is, completely against them, but there's definitely some contention, if you will. And so that's another thing we have to take into consideration as well. But I firmly believe that they were acting in good faith to the best of their capacity, because another thing too, I'm sure the last thing they want to do, especially with the contention and with all of this tension surrounding the trial is act in bad faith, and then have this become an even bigger issue once things are discovered that they were negligent or that they were biased in some way, because then that just further tarnishes the Jedi's image. And right now they're trying to do everything correct, if you will, or as correct as we can see.
I think like if I were a citizen of the Republic, because like they had to have reported on this, like, okay, y'all kicked out one Padawan because y'all said she was a suspect, so y'all gave her up, but then it turned out to be another one that framed that one, and then I don't know if they would have known she left the order, but I feel like some nose to grindstone reporter would have put that out on the HoloNet. They're like, Ahsoka Tano seen leaving the Jedi Temple, just like hiding behind one of those bushes with like just a camera, just to your Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen of the Star Wars universe are right there ready for the scoop. But I feel like there is no getting out of this unscathed, but I don't think that, to me, without completing your investigation, that's not acting in good faith. That's the like, let's try and save face, which I also think they kind of do at the end with like, this was your great trial. Say that like 2 weeks from then. Don't say it right after she's done. Like, let her process some things and then be like, yeah, okay, you can become a knight now. Like,
I am 100% on this. Is again one of those fun things where you're like arguing against yourself, but I'm 100% on board. They could have handled that a lot better, especially with this is your great trial. Now you're ready to launch off into the world.
Kind of towards the finale of this, we get a pop-in from Tarkin. Episode 20, it's The Wrong Jedi.
The Senate requests that Ahsoka Tano be indicted for acts of treason against the Republic.
A fair trial Padawan Tano will have, in accordance with Jedi tradition.
Ah yes, Jedi tradition. I'm afraid, Master Yoda, that the Senate believes that an internal Jedi trial would seem biased. Therefore, the Senate asks that the Council expel Ahsoka Tano from the Jedi Order, so that she may be put to a Republic military tribunal, where she will receive more impartial judgment.
What is the responsibility of the Jedi Order in regards to the Republic? Are they equal but separate? Are they separate but underneath the Republic? Are the Jedi above the Republic? And how those laws should be processed?
When it comes to bias, I would have fought back as a member of the Jedi Council, is be like, well, we have just as much stake in the game as you are. She is a Jedi, yes, but she's also a citizen of the Republic. The attack was on the Jedi Temple and harmed both Jedi clones and citizens of the Republic. So either way, we're all intertwined into this. You have a working relationship with her master, the Chancellor, who's essentially the judge in this case, although some of the things he says doesn't really give off judge vibes. So it's like he's got skin in the game because he's essentially a surrogate father to her master. So I don't think anybody is going to really be free of any great bias in this, but I think there is some compromise with the Jedi being involved in, finishing out the investigation or being a part of more than just, all right, here you go, here's what we got, here's her, good luck. Because I don't know what their files look like, but I think both Beth and I know when you are given a file and you only got a couple days, you don't have the same kind of context as someone that's had it for, that worked the file.
Exactly. I think the biggest issue is the fact that we don't have the necessary information about jurisdiction. Again, trying to go about this as cut and dry as I can. Mm-hmm. The necessary information about jurisdiction to actually answer those questions. Because the Senate does fund the Jedi to some extent, right? I'm fairly certain.
Yes, interplanetary commerce.
Yes.
Commerce clause.
There we go. But we don't we don't know the extent of that. And so we technically don't know. Again, and so with that, we're led to assume that like the Republic would take jurisdictional precedence over the Jedi. But then there's kind of this, it's so fun. I would just love if the Star Wars universe could please give us just case law or anything just to work off of. We have just a few statutes, just anything to work off of. But you have this like very real jurisdictional issue where there are just too many questions to really properly answer if that, if they were acting in their power, or if they were, kind of being negligent, or if they could have done something more, because we don't know the limitations of their power. And as far as the investigation part, that also applies to the investigation. We don't know the limits of that investigation.
To throw in a hypothetical for both of you, do you think that the Jedi Temple and the Temple grounds should be sovereign territory?
To be like a non-state sovereign nation, as far as an international, if we were doing like ICC stuff.
Because hypothetically, the argument with sedition is that it happens on Republic land, like, right? It's an attack on the Republic because it's Coruscant. But if it were the Jedi Temple was sovereign in its grounds, they would be able to try that based on their own traditions.
Yeah, it'd have to be like a UN situation where like the United Nations is inside the United States, but it's its own sovereign territory. I mean, yes, the US would get first crack at like investigating and probably prosecuting because it's, close by, but everyone has skin in the game. So and going back to Choco's question, that's probably what the Jedi should be, a separate sovereign, because right now they are intertwined, and that's kind of the issue, especially as we're seeing in the High Republic. The Jedi should not be as heavily involved in political matters.
To editorialize is why I appreciate Mace Windu, is because he was the least political.
But he had a secret
get
love.
portrayed that way.
The Republic.
The citizens of the Republic.
Yes.
Including Ahsoka.
As far as sovereignty, I think the issue that, and I think it's very similar to what everyone has voiced, is the fact that the Republic and the Jedi are very symbiotic. And so if they were to become sovereign, again, they would be dealing, because not only is it the Jedi, but it's the Jedi Order as well that you have to factor in. And that's obviously a religious institution. And so I feel like some sort of tribunal would have to be established that's just outside and more, there's like a lot of bias there that I could see a lot of things could go wrong. I think one of the things that could be difficult, if you're a citizen on Coruscant and you're like, oh great, they have their own court, they're Force users, they're more powerful than us. I feel like that could potentially breed a little bit of resentment, again, against the Jedi prior to Order 66.
Another spicy one for the both of you. Given the evidence at hand and information available to you, would you have been able to objectively render impartiality to Ahsoka?
Just one caveat to add, because this also remembers that while our story follows Anakin and Ahsoka most of the time, the Jedi Council themselves don't have that same context.
I guess try to lay out all the evidence that would have been in the reports. Whether it's the report Anakin and Ahsoka made, the report on her, on Letta's death, Ahsoka's escape, and then subsequent capture. So it would have been, you have the video. They may or may not have the video, or they may just have the report of the video of Ahsoka allegedly killing Letta. They would have had her in jail, that she escaped custody, that in her escape she assaulted clones, because the ones in the jail weren't killed. Then when she was in the sewer, they find clones with lightsaber wounds, and Fox is there, or lightsaber fatal marks. We're not sure. They're probably
Fox.
dead. Yes.
Not to editorialize.
Yes.
He's the worst.
But screw Fox, and not in the fun way. I'm looking at some of my clone stems. She's seen running with Ventress, and then she was found where the nanobombs were. With the video, and her escaping custody, I would want to investigate more. Like I would want to talk to the clones that were still alive. How did she escape custody? Like what happened there? Like obviously as an audience member, but like we don't know. So the only person that's gonna know are possibly the clones or Ahsoka herself. You can question her and try to like suss out the truth, like using the Force about, whether, like Chirrut Imwe has said, you know, like the dark side surrounds like someone murder. So I'm assuming the Jedi Council knows something like that, you know, like to try and actually interview her and figure out what, you know, what we're getting from her. You know, she escaped custody. The video went out. She assaulted the clones. And then you have the clones that are killed. It's like, okay, when Anakin, Plo, and the clones were chasing her, she is not making any aggressive movements towards them. And she's specifically acting in defense. So why would she switch up when she's not in sight would be something I would question, given how she was trained and what she was emulating while in plain sight of a council member and the help. Anakin is the help.
That's literally Padme's husband moment.
Yes, scene running with Ventress. Now I thought about this earlier. Being with Ventress is an illusion of guilt or criminality. Okay, who was palling around with Ventress fighting Maul and Savage? Obi-Wan, who at least sensed that that Obi-Wan would have help, whether he or not he knew it was Ventress. And also Yoda could have captured Ventress on day one of the Clone Wars and was just like, strong you are, but you're good. Like, all right, Muppet Man. But yeah,
listen,
no.
Yoda's not on trial here.
I was like, are those failings of the Jedi though? I don't know.
Obviously, Obi-Wan as a council member can lend insight into Ventress. Like, she will help you. Like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, you know, Ventress isn't all bad. This is pre-Dark Disciple, so not even getting into that. But at least there is that hint that Ventress can work with you. And she's not a separatist. She has no love for the separatists anymore.
Small little follow-up for Beth, based on what Chris said. Do you think that Ahsoka bears some responsibility in exacerbating the issue by running?
But I also want to hear your thoughts on what you think would have happened in the trial had she stayed in custody.
That is a fantastic question because she 100% like there's no arguing around it. She absolutely exacerbated it. Had she followed, and again, this like gets into procedure. Had she just followed the procedure, and even it's one of those things that it looks worse when you obviously decide to bust out of jail, and then you're claiming that you're not guilty. It doesn't exactly lend itself to what you're saying. Your actions don't necessarily align with that. So I think had she followed along, it would have been much better for her overall. But it just, again, if you're following along, you have nothing to, like, clearly there's nothing to hide. Would Barriss have been successful? Like, would the framing of Ahsoka be successful? Who knows? But because that's like a very far theoretical. But her actions, is she obviously? I mean, I don't want to say like gross negligence, but like just that was not thought through. I think that's the best thing.
I think that is a question that's hard for me to separate real world applications with happens here, because you have millions upon millions of people that are in jail right now that did not run, that are innocent, that were railroaded by the system, which is one of the reasons why this strikes a chord with me, especially with Ahsoka being black and brown coded, and how many times a system that was not designed to protect them, that they get railroaded through for political appeasement or for political points, appeasement of the masses. And you know, the expediency of, well, this is the suspect, tunnel vision, confirmation bias, they're done.
See, and
she's and she's a child, which I think we, you know, that's also the thing. It's like, it's one thing if, you know, she's an adult, but she is 14, maybe 15.
No, she's 17 when she leaves the Order. She's 17 when she leaves the Order.
Okay.
And season 7 is a couple of months afterwards.
Oh, okay. I thought there was like a year and a half time jump. Okay, no. So, okay, yeah. So 17, but still a child. You know, ask my coworkers. Apparently, people are still children until they're like 21, 22. So I think even if she had stayed, they had at least her, you know, allegedly on murder. And they would have been like, oh, well, why would she, at least, okay, it's murder because you were upset and it's revenge and everything. But then on the outset, they have already think that she's the mastermind or at least a co-conspirator in this, treasonous plot. So either way, it's not looking good for her. If I were a trained investigator like she was, I'm probably going to be looking for answers myself as well. Like if she's just a random citizen and it's like, oh, I'm broken out of jail and just go run, that's another thing. And she's also not fleeing. She's going to investigate, which I think is an also key distinction.
But the council doesn't do that. That's the problem. The council doesn't do that until after.
As far as we see, though, they didn't really talk to her until they had already decided, which is also something I would have done differently. Like, I'm talking to you before I make a decision, because if she, because even with what she did, where she's still trying to piece things together, she's flustered, she's not really giving you good information, then, okay, that helps you in barring her. But if you've already made your decision and then she's doing that, then all right.
What decision's being made?
But whatever that room that's in when they, bar her from the Jedi Order, they've already made their decision to bar her from the Order. And as the information we have now, they did not talk to her before then, because it kind of blows my mind that Barriss was never mentioned until Ventress says it to Anakin. She doesn't say that to Padme. She doesn't say that to, because at a minimum you can be like, Barriss will vouch for me. She didn't say that to anyone, but I feel like if it was in a calmer environment with the council, then that might have been stated.
Do either of you think it bears importance to make a distinction between deciding to expel Ahsoka versus rendering their own verdict? Do you think expulsion was equivalent to indictment?
Yes.
I think it had to be done. She can't be you can't be part of the Order. Again, this gets into a lot of conflict, but it had to be. There's no way around it in order for it to have a trial. But that's not an admission that they did anything wrong. That's the big difference, is the fact that it's that had to happen in order for her to even have the trial.
I'll allude it to pleading the fifth in a civil context. In criminal, you can't use that, someone pleading the fifth, against them. The jury can't do that. But in a civil case, the plaintiff or defendant or whoever's pleading the fifth can, argue to the jury that, there's a reason why they're not answering this question and asserting their Fifth Amendment privilege. I put it to, there's a reason why the Jedi Council expelled her from the Order. That doesn't happen every day. And at least from the senator's perspective, who not normally work with the Jedi, but work with the Jedi more than the average person, that might stink more to them. Because even though they are supposed to be impartial, no one really is. You bring all your biases into the jury box with you. I say this having been on a jury.
So just for clarification, Chris, you think that expulsion was them saying she was guilty?
No, but I will say, not that it's not an admission of guilt, but it is an indictment
on her character then.
Yes.
No, it's it's a necessary thing that had to happen in order for her to even have what they considered a fair trial, with removing any of the biases that they would have unintentionally or intentionally conveyed. But it was a thing that had to happen in order for things to go forward. Do I think it's the correct decision? Personally, that's a separate topic.
Yeah, it was just there's something here. She's not she's not guilty because she hasn't had her trial, but if there was truly nothing there, they wouldn't have expelled her. And by nothing I mean nothing. If they tried to pin this crime on Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan has nothing to do with this.
But the thing is, that can be argued the opposite way.
Oh, of course. Classic answer. It depends.
Yeah, exactly. So they, maybe they could have, again, because we don't have their motives for making this decision besides the fact they could have been like, okay, we need to do this because we think somebody could have thought like she was innocent and this is how things had to go forward. So it's difficult to say.
I will say though, if they thought she was innocent, like I said in my video, they should have let her know that.
Oh, it could have been handled better.
Yeah, because even just saying that is like a lot more. It's like, explain this to her, like, this has to happen or else it's going to cause an issue for pretty much every other Jedi. So we have your back, but we have to let you go into this trial. Bias or no, they can still take a public stance in support of her.
What I'm hearing is that we need expert witnesses.
We do.
What I'm
We
hearing,
do.
we need a lot of expert witness testimony.
We need expert witness testimony. We need lay witness testimony.
This is, again, this official plea, 1 million, please Disney. Just one book of case law, one.
So a question comes to mind because Master Seishi 10 mentions
She was found in possession of nano-droid explosives. This alone is enough to convict her.
all things considered, is that true? And if that's true, were their hands tied at that point in time? And whether or not they believed her to be innocent, if they truly thought she was getting a fair trial, is that relevant?
What's the precedence for possession in the Galactic Republic?
Oh my God, I know, I'm like, wait a minute.
I guess you could.
She was caught having escaped prison in a burning warehouse, burning the evidence that turned out to be the exact weapon used to destroy the temple by the person she's accused of murdering.
It looks really bad. I mean, it just...
It doesn't look good.
Yeah, it doesn't look good.
That's the point where I think any prosecutor worth their salt, or even, the Jedi Council would ask, okay, if you didn't go there to destroy it, why would you be there? Like, if you're actually, interested in getting who, actually did it, the prosecutor should ask that question beforehand. But at the Jedi Council, it's like, okay, you said you weren't there to destroy it. Like, you were pleading with the clones not to shoot you before you got stunned. Like, why were you there? Oh, Barris told me. Jedi, is she a knight at this point?
Yeah, she's a knight.
Jedi Knight Offie, can you come to the principal's office? And I think that is an issue of having to tell that part of the story in less than, I would say, really 10 minutes, that you had to like squeeze in these issues that if you had like another episode, which they could have, none of us would have complained. And you could have just thrown in a couple more designs in there and sell more toys. Like, come on, win-win for everybody. But yeah, like, I think that's one of the things that could have been padded more, fleshed out more, that would cause less of an issue.
I think you would have to lay a lot of foundation, in order to actually like make that argument in court and have it stand up.
I do have one final question. Optics on the whole situation. Now, it's a separate question whether or not the optics should be considered at all. Given the public opinion of the Jedi and given the Jedi's state as being separate from the Republic, is them keeping out of the investigation better for Ahsoka's interests? If they had more Jedi and do the investigation, would that hurt her case? Given their perception at that point in time.
I don't think the Jedi should have represented her, but I don't think because the Republic wasn't going to stop them from doing the investigation, like at that point, because while Anakin wasn't allowed to go in there by Fox, and I say wasn't allowed because Anakin easily could have just been like, bye, and then just it's Anakin. It's totally in his character. But I think
that's a great point. Sorry, slight addendum is them not stopping Anakin from superseding their orders. Also, them allowing things to proceed without taking an official stance.
I say no because they weren't going to stop Anakin anyway.
Okay, well,
like if it's a
remove
different
yourself.
Jedi.
Remove yourself really quickly. Do you? That's a great question to pose to both of you. Was there merit in the Jedi allowing Anakin to investigate this? unchecked. Now, of course, you can argue they wouldn't be able to stop him, or it wouldn't matter what they say, he's still going to do it. Is there merit in that?
ass.
I mean,
I'm just saying,
He would have brought a seat with him and sat him.
I think there isn't, because I also think their eyes were focused on the trial at this point and other matters of galactic importance, because there are only so many of them, that they did not have the time to babysit Anakin. This is why he's a knight. We can't babysit him anymore. And then the other thing is, obviously he went straight to the trial, but he never reported to anyone on what he was doing. Even like he didn't even, shoot a quick call to Obi-Wan and be like, hey, yo, Ventress is here. I found her in 2 minutes. Why did it take us 3 years to find her before this? So there's an opportunity there for like the Jedi to have some merit, but it's Anakin. If Obi-Wan was investigating, then I'm like, oh yeah, they let him do that, because Obi-Wan is more likely to follow the will of the council regardless of his feelings, as opposed to Anakin, who is just like, got my feelings on my sleeve, guys.
I have a small little follow-up for you afterwards, but I want Beth's thoughts on this. Is there merit?
That's tough, because I think, are we getting into optics? Because optics wise, oh man.
I'll give you my addendum so that you can answer both, and then Chris can follow up. Considering what Yoda said, his first stance on the matter was that she would have their own trial internally before being pressured by the government. Do you think it was already within their minds to investigate this quietly?
Yeah, I think that there can be. I think that it's definitely possible. Let's look at that. It depends. It's one of those questions. But I mean, it did sound like they were planning on handling it internally before things got a little bit out of hand. And then obviously you get into the jurisdictional issue again. I guess that just really comes down to it's just optics wise though, at the same time, it's one of those things that looks biased, but it could have merit. There we go. That's what I'll say. That being said though, optics wise, it also looks, if that is how they're trying to prove merit, it looks very disorganized. That's, I guess, what I would say. It looks like there isn't like a clear power structure, if you will, or this is how we do things. And so it gets a little messy. So it's a great question. Merit
wise, it's better if someone other than Anakin does it, whether that even Plo is kind of questionable because of his personal relationship with Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, but if they investigated, that would look more like, okay, the council is looking into this, versus Anakin, who is her master directly, who is going to, like, just from an outside perspective of what the average citizen knows about the Jedi, a master and an apprentice are going to be more closely linked than, a Jedi council member and a Padawan, considering how many Jedi there are, Like, I wouldn't be, I think we've seen throughout, like, canon where you have, younger kids or teenagers that look like Padawans and knights, or Padawans and their masters, as, like, father, daughter, mother, son, mother, daughter, parent-child relationship. And then when they're older, maybe sibling relationship, because that's them projecting their own experiences to try and understand what the Jedi do. People are going to look at like, oh yeah, of course they're going that, the parent is going to investigate what happened with the child, or the older sibling is going to investigate, because that's what I would do. This has been it's just been like a fascinating theoretical to like parse everything out. I wish Anakin looked forward into the Force a couple years and did what he needed to do to give a nice little Force massage to Fox's neck.
Seconded.
So,
off the record.
so this is, having wrapped that conversation, when the subject of Ahsoka's, this is a fandom question, right? This isn't about the trial itself. But when the subject of Ahsoka's trial comes up, it's often the Jedi that are slated as being the people who fumbled the bag. Why is it that the Jedi typically get blamed more often then Barriss Offee, the person that actually did it. And that's to both of you, both of y'all.
I think it's because these are, if we're just looking at it from, again, a fandom perspective, people have very strong perceptions on different Jedi. And I think the example with Mace Windu, how everyone tends to be like, why are you calling her citizen? You're a horrible person. You know, this gets into like people's emotions. And so they have those, again, it's really hard to separate like emotions and logic in that aspect. And I think that's why it gets pretty contentious. And also we're looking at it because we came into the entire Star Wars universe with the Jedi Order having failed. And so we know inherently that what they're doing isn't going to work. And so it's hard to just look at that objectively while we know that what they're doing is going to lead to their demise or contribute to their demise in the future. So I think that's why. And some of it's just frustration because you're like, guys, you should have known better. You know? You're like, God, I can see it. Why can't you? And that's what makes it even more tragic is the fact that we know this is going to happen and we're just like, oh God. So it's just, there's a lot of emotion tied into it.
It's interesting because especially lately, I've been seeing more of the people harp on Barriss. Every blue moon, you know, whenever someone brings up like the Ahsoka TV show, I think that because Barriss gets punished for what she does, and you know, we see her lose per se in both losing to Anakin in a duel and then, you know, confessing her crimes and everything like that, that there is that sort of resolution with what she did to Ahsoka, as opposed with the Jedi Order, where you have her, you know, barred. And then when she comes back, you know, Plo apologizes. Then you hit him like, well, what we really saw was that this was your great trial. And to a lot of people, that's like a slap in the face because that seems less like an apology and more of a, we messed up. Like, here's your, you know, gift card to Chuck E. Cheese. Have some fun on us. And I think that also ties into the, you know, what Beth was saying about the Jedi and their fall. Like, y'all didn't take ownership of what you did to her. And that's where, you know, people like a lot of people that grew up with Ahsoka and see themselves in Ahsoka, who we've all had someone do us wrong or an organization do us wrong and they never owned up to it. So I think there's that projection onto that as well.
There's an interesting follow-up to that. Do you think Ahsoka felt resolution?
No. And I think that's one interesting thing that we need to see, that I would have liked to see more in the Tales of the Jedi thing, in like that post Ahsoka novel to pre-Rebels time, where she goes from Fulcrum to Ahsoka Tano. And part of that has to be coming to grips with what Barriss, who was her closest friend outside of Anakin, did to her. And then follow up with that with post season 2 of Rebels, where now she finds out that the person that was closest to her went down a similar path. And why does that keep happening with the people around her? And how does she come to grips with that?
I think resolution and acceptance are very different.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she gets to a point of acceptance, obviously, as we see later on in her life, but I don't think she ever gets like that resolution and that emotional catharsis that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do hope that we get to see some of that in the Ahsoka show, because that would be fascinating. But it's just, she just deserves better. It's just so sad.
I'm gonna just jump in and answer that question myself as well. For Ahsoka, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
For Ahsoka, she doesn't get that resolution, because before she's capable of getting it, every person she's ever known has been murdered. So like there's other things that kind of take precedent at that point in time, and then she's forgotten all about it because she's just like, everyone I love is dead.
So bad.
But I do feel like when she found out Anakin was Vader, that was brought back up too, just for the simple fact that it's like, You know, if I had a nickel for every time someone close to me turned to the dark side and tried to murder me, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice.
What is the true failing of the Jedi Order, and what could they have done to prevent it?
Very multifaceted, 100%. I think it is the fact. See, this gets into Andor. This is the systems either change or die, and it gets into the fact that the Jedi Order wasn't adapting as quickly as it needed to the situations that were brought forth by the Clone Wars. Which, and that's expected, because that's how that's how institutions fall. Like, we have calamities and wars and stuff, and then those are generally the fallouts, is some sort of, you know, collapse, societal collapse. But I think, again, they weren't able to adapt quickly enough. Obviously, we don't see Palpatine's, you know, machinations in the background, or they don't see it, we see it. But I think that may, and I know, like, this is like later on, like Empire Strikes Back, it gets into the fact that they were too set in their ways to really work on actively adapting. And even that's something that even Luke says, that in, you know, we have a little moment in the sequels, and they do recognize that, obviously. But I think that's the biggest thing, and that's something even Yoda admits too, or at least like alludes to, being like, okay, yeah, we had some issues there. So it's pretty hard. Like, how do you adapt with the structured order too? So it's kind of like a system set up to fail inherently.
That's the angle that I'm going to come at from it. It's something that I've heard several times in the church when talking about the generational changes that come as generations grow older and other generations come up to replace the leadership or become more involved. You gotta marry the message, not the method. And so the Jedi were married or attached to how they did things for thousands of years. And they're like, this has always worked, this is always going to work, until it doesn't. And they had no mechanism to adapt to what was going on. Because if we take the Old Republic as canon, which we'll get at some point, if you did have those Jedi Sith wars, the Clone Wars are not that by any means, you know. And so the Sith learned to adapt to the situation around them. And the Jedi thought, since they had won that they were like, cool, victory for all time. We defeated our mortal enemy. And then they failed their ultimate, like, no attachments rule, because they attached to tradition.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't think they were ever acting in bad faith, though. I think that's the big difference, is some people, I think, tend to blame them for, you know, trying to stay too adherent to the rules. But I think Chris clarified it, you know, that's just all they knew. I think they were genuinely trying to be good.
And with that, we wrap today's conversation on Ahsoka's trial. I want to thank Chris and Beth for participating in the conversation. Such an enlightening and profound conversation, especially coming from two professional lawyers who have no idea how law works in the galaxy far, far away, as much as they're allowed to see in the shows, which is, you know, it's always interesting to think about, you know, how much can we judge these things without knowing how any of that works. We're going to have a lot more of these conversations moving forward. I think next episode we're going to have a conversation with DePaul, and I think Choco's going to take that conversation on whether or not the Jedi are a cult. And that's going to be a fascinating conversation. We're going to wrap this up. Thank you, Chris and Beth. You can go follow them at Star Wars Lawyer everywhere on the socials, and at mara.j.skywalker on TikTok, and on Twitter, right, with the underscore this time. Underscore gang. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we hope that you learned something new, or this conversation was fascinating to you, and that you now realize that we can all disagree, but all love each other at the end. But of course, that's the end. On to the next one.
for Latin for life.
We are all the Republic.
And Mace Windu did nothing wrong. Just kidding. May the Force be
Amen.
with you.
Yes.